Hello, everyone. Panos here from PNOE, and today we have Dr. Schallenberger returning to our webinar. That's going to be a continuation from the first one we did, which was about 4 weeks ago, where we uh, started by discussing the main teachings and the main methodology that Dr. Schallenberger has developed around cardiometabolic testing. We gave a very comprehensive background around the nature of the test, the biomarkers that are being recorded, and how these can be used in order to get a high-level overview of someone's biology. And as part of this continuing discussion, what we're going to do is we're going to pick up from where we left off our previous conversation and dive into some of the specific systems that you can analyze through cardiometabolic testing. What I mean by diving into some of the systems in greater specificity is that cardiometabolic testing is a type of assessment that looks into four main systems of your biology: your lungs, your heart, your cells, and your nervous system. And the beauty of it is that not only does it give you a comprehensive overview of your overall biology, it actually has the ability to double click in one of these systems, in each one of these systems, and provide additional specific information about the underlying biology of the system. Um, that's sort of like a introduction so that people can basically connect the two conversations. Everything is being recorded. The first discussion slash webinar we did with Dr. Schallenberger, I think is already online, but for those listening now, and obviously for those who are going to be listening the recording, this is just like a bridge between the two conversations. Without further ado, Dr. Schallenberger, over to you if you want to give a little bit of background again for those who are maybe joining for the first time. And we continue on with the conversation as we discussed.
Yeah, okay, great, Panos. Good introduction. Hi, everybody. Glad to be with you. I'm really very happy to be with you because my passion is this VO2 testing. And I want to take a little bit of time just to talk about why it's so important for the medical profession. Now, I know a lot of other people are doing this. Trainers find this sort of testing very valuable. Health coaches find it valuable. But for you medical doctors out there listening to me, or naturopathic doctors or nurse practitioners, and you're dealing in the medical field, this is an absolutely, I think, essential test for us to have. Now, I've been using it for 25, 30 years. So yeah, so I realize that I do this form of testing on virtually every single patient that walks in my office. So it's got a wide bit of applicability. It's not one of those tests you go by and you just do selectively for certain people. No, this is a test that's critically important for everybody. And I'm so passionate about it because doctors don't do it. In my mind, this is the single most important parameter we can look at. And I want to take about 5 or 10 minutes here to go over why I think that, because you'll be impressed with it. But I think it's the single most important parameter doctors can use on their patients. And yet we get blood sugar, we get cholesterol levels, we get insulin levels, we get hormone levels, we do all this kind of stuff. But we never look at the single most important parameter there is. And so I want to just take a few seconds to talk about this. First of all,
Doctor, if you don't mind, what I can do is I can maybe share the slide that I had last time that basically explains the fundamental concept, right? And we can sort of like help people visually
okay,
by giving them like the underlying science and process of cardiometabolic testing.
okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, understand everybody that this, all the other tests we get are pretty much static tests. So if you're going to check somebody's cholesterol, if you're going to check their blood sugar, whatever you're going to check, you're just looking at it at a point in time. And there's a certain tests that like treadmill testing that the cardiologist uses, such like that, that are not static tests. They're functional tests. We're actually looking at how the person is functioning. So that's an important thing to understand. You get somebody's blood sugar at 8 o'clock, at 8:15, it could be different. This is a functional test that's going to tell you how that individual's machine is working. So I want to give you an idea of how critically important this is. I just did a lecture not too long ago, and the title of the lecture was if you had one pill to take that could increase your longevity by a factor of 400%, would you take that pill? And of course, and this is kind of a nice question. I can actually facetiously give this question to my patients. And of course, the answer is yes, of course. And then I say, and what about if the pill's free? And they say, oh yeah, definitely. I'll take a free pill to increase my survival rate by 400%. Well, that's what you can do. The pill basically is exercise, and it's exercise properly done. So I want to make a point about this. Number one of the mistakes most medical practitioners make is they might, in passing, tell their patients, oh yeah, I want you to make sure you're exercising regularly. But they don't give a prescription. That's kind of, in my mind, that's sort of like saying to a patient, I want you to take penicillin for this problem. But sort of kind of, without telling them how much penicillin, how often to take it, what the dose is or anything like that. Because you can take penicillin properly and it works great, or you can take it improperly and it doesn't work very well. And that is true for exercise. So exercise is so critically important. I'm going to get into this in a second. I'll show you why. But we need to not only, as medical practitioners, we need to not only measure these VO2s, that Panos just pointed to, we need to utilize that data to prescribe an exercise regime. There's a lot more we can talk about than just exercise from this test. And that's critically important. But I'm going to focus for right now just on the exercise thing, because I believe many of you doctors and other practitioners out there may not fully appreciate how important exercise properly done is. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about something called METs, METS, METs. This stands for metabolic equivalence. The PNOE test measures your metabolic equivalence. So what this amounts to, a METs is, one MET is how much oxygen your body consumes in 1 minute, dependent on your height and your weight. So bigger guys are going to consume more oxygen, so forth and so on. But that's one MET. So you're at rest, you're not exercising. How much oxygen is your body consuming over 1 minute? That's one MET. So what we know is that if you're a man, and your maximum METs, and you can find that out by exercising. So we put you on some kind of either treadmill or some sort of exercise machine, and we make it go harder and harder. So it's ramped up. It's getting harder and harder. And we're measuring your METs as you go up. And at some point, then you're going to reach a maximum, and we measure that maximum. Okay. And so if you're a man, and your maximum METs are 14.3. That means you're consuming 14.3 times as much oxygen at your maximum as you were at rest. You have just increased your overall survival rate by 400%. Now, why is that important? That's important because many of our patients come in, and guess what, folks? You don't know their METs, do you? Because you're not measuring them. I know the METs on every patient that walks in my office because I measure it. And, it's not unusual for me to find a METs of 4, 5, maybe 6. But you got to understand that if your METs, your one MET is in the area, or your maximum METs are in the area of, say, for a man, 4.7, you're 4 times more likely to have a decrease in your survival rate than if your METs were up around the 12s. 4 times. So I don't know of any pill out there I could prescribe to my patient that would increase their survival rate by a factor of 4. And yes, by the way, it's free. All you got to do is exercise, but you got to exercise properly. And that's where these METs come important. So the METs are going to be important in two ways. Number one, it's going to determine your overall survivability. So if I test your METs and you're a man and you come in and you got a METs of 14.3 or greater, great. I don't have to do anything with you. You're in great shape. Thank you very much. You just increased your survival rate by 400%. Maybe we can talk about other things, but at least I got that basic covered. On the other hand, if you're coming in and your METs are significantly lower, I know we got to go to work, and I know I have to prescribe an exercise regime for you that you will do that's properly focused on your particular level of fitness. Because you can't go out there and look at these equations where, you see these equations say, well, you should subtract your age from like 220 and that you can base your exercise levels on that. You can't do that. We published a study in 2004 on this, and we took 20 people. We actually measured their METs, and we compared it to what the formula told us. And the formula was right in 2 of them. That was it. The other 18 was completely wrong. So those people, based upon that formula, all 18 of those people have been wasting their time. And that's not the idea. If you
And I
do
think,
this
Doctor,
appropriately, it doesn't take that much time.
absolutely. I think, Doctor, it may be a good idea to do like a short parenthesis and, walk people through the different metrics that you can actually pick up from the test so that they can understand how these metrics can actually lead to specific exercise prescription based on the underlying problems they may have in specific systems.
Yeah, I just
Uh,
want to introduce everybody right now to how
mhm.
important it is, and then we can get
Yeah.
into that.
Mhm.
But because the importance of this is so underestimated in the medical world.
100%,
And we need
100%.
to
Yeah,
we need to break through
without a doubt.
that barrier there.
Mhm.
Um, so and then the other thing is you use the METs to determine your optimum exercise. So if I've got somebody whose maximum METs is say 5, I can't have them exercising at a METs level of 12. That's not appropriate for them. So not only can we diagnose if there's a problem with their overall survivability, but we can also treat it appropriately with the exercise that is appropriate for them. So that's the first thing I want to get through how important this is. Now, the next thing is I want to just briefly touch on the what you might not appreciate that exercise does. This is going to take me about 2 minutes. I'm going to run through a number of facts here about how important having maximal METs is. Now, by the way, as you get older, your METs decrease as a rule. But I will tell you, I have many patients in their 80s that have maximum METs similar to what you see with other people in their 30s. So it doesn't have to be that way if you're doing things correctly. So I'm just going to run through for the next couple of minutes here. Everything that I'm about to tell you about is published data. So nothing here is something I'm making up. Number one, exercising at your maximal METs increases your mitochondrial cristae density, the density of the mitochondria, which of course improves the way the mitochondria work, improves the way you process oxygen, improves your energy level, and is critical for preventing every disease that associated with aging that there is. Number two, exercising at maximal METs increases mitochondrial volume. So the volume of the mitochondria, and they can shrink over time, especially as you get older. You can bump it up by a good 40 to 50% by exercising properly. It increases your adenosine monophosphate, AMP, and your adenosine diphosphate production. If you don't increase that, guess what? Your mitochondria don't work. You need ADP for your mitochondria to work, and you need ADP to generate ATP. And exercise bumps that up significantly. Exercise increases your NAD to NADH ratio, which if you want to look up any disease there is literally associated with aging, any disease at all, you'll find you just plug in any disease, osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, whatever you want, and NAD to NADH ratio, and you will see that that particular ratio controls your risk for all of those diseases. So we increase that by properly done exercise. The other thing is that properly done exercise activates what we call the PGC1 alpha system, which increases mitochondrial biogenesis. That particular system makes us make more mitochondria, which is better. More is better in the case of mitochondria. It also, exercise reduces electron chain proton leakage. So as we're exercising, as you're processing oxygen, you're pumping protons out between the mitochondrial membranes. That's going to produce a gradient in there. That gradient is going to be satisfied as the protons come back in through complex 5 and generate ATP for energy. But if they can't do that successfully, they leak in between the membranes and destroy the mitochondria. So exercise properly done eliminates that leakage issue. Everybody knows that antioxidant enzymes are absolutely critical to preventing age-related diseases. And the thing that upregulates antioxidant enzymes is the NRF2 system. And what we know now is that exercise properly done, and by that I mean right at your top METs, is going to start upregulating that NRF2 system and increasing the production of antioxidant enzymes more than any other pill, by the way. You hear people go out, well, take some vitamin C, do this, do that, to upregulate antioxidant enzymes. Doesn't do it. Exercise does it. Exercise also increases uncoupling protein number 2 expression, which is absolutely critical to mitochondrial to work. That uncoupling protein number 2 and also uncoupling protein 3, both are stimulated by exercise, and that prevents the protons as they coming back in from breaking the membranes of the mitochondria. As we get older, our bodies tend to shift. This is just a fact of aging. As you get older, your body is going to tend to shift from a primary fat metabolism over to a glucose metabolism. Why does it do that? It's because your mitochondria need to be more efficient to burn fat. They can burn glucose in a less efficient manner. And as we become older, we don't do things so well. So we tend to shift away from a fat metabolism into glucose metabolism, which is why as you get older, guess what? You don't tend to get skinnier, you tend to get fatter. Okay, so what happens is exercise increases fat metabolism. It tends to put you into a more youthful type of metabolism. It also, by the way, decreases thrombotic activity. So that's the forming of blood clots. And blood clots are a big problem, can be a big problem. It also increases the breakdown of blood products. We call that fibrinolysis. It decreases plaque formation, since plaque formation is a function of clotting. It increases nitric oxide production. All of this is exercise does. It's all published stuff, folks. It increases oxygen hemoglobin dissociation. So when your hemoglobin is delivering the oxygen to the cell, it's got to be released so the oxygen can go into the cell. It's got to be released from the hemoglobin. Exercise causes that release to happen. So it actually gets more oxygen into your cells. It decreases your arterial stiffness, which is a big problem as we get older. The arteries get stiffer, which impairs the flow of blood, and that tends to shut down all cellular processes. So it improves arterial stiffness. It also increases heart rate variability. It increases endothelial progenitor cell population. Now, what the heck is that? Endothelial progenitor cells are circulating stem cells, constantly circulating in our blood. And what they do is, when the endothelium in the artery gets damaged, as it often does, for all kinds of reasons, and I don't want to get into that, so another lecture, but that endothelium is constantly getting damaged in our case. Not to worry, because we have these endothelium progenitor cells, they're stem cells, constantly circulating in the blood. And as soon as they see some damage done to the endothelium, bang, they go in and they repair that, unless you don't have enough. So exercise increases the amount of endothelium progenitor cells in your bloodstream. It increases your vagal tone. A lot of the diseases that we see have to do with a decreased vagal tone. All the heart rate stuff and issues with the GI stuff is often due to that. Exercise fixes a lot of GI and cardiovascular problems. It improves insulin sensitivity, and everybody out there, I'm sure, knows how important insulin sensitivity is. Exercise improves that. It actually creates certain cytokines that go up into the brain and improve mood and prevent depression. So it hits the mental aspect. It increases red blood cell production. It facilitates the transport of oxygen and the removal of CO2. CO2 is a toxic gas. You've got to get CO2 out of your body or you're going to have problems. And one good way to tell your patients to check for that is just hold your breath for about 2 or 3 minutes, and you won't be eliminating CO2, and see what it makes you feel like. So exercise helps us to eliminate CO2 better. It improves our brain function. All this is in the literature, prevents cancer, diabetes, neurological disease, cardiovascular disease. All of that in the literature, prevented by exercise properly done. So I just wanted to take a little time to go through that so everybody could kind of get pumped up and think, okay, I'm a medical doctor. I'm a medical practitioner. I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm a naturopath. Whatever my degree is, I'm treating people and they're coming in and they're depending on me for health. Am I measuring their METs? Am I just casually disregarding that? You don't want to be that person. So I'm hoping through these webinars, we get everybody to understand in the medical profession how absolutely critical it is to do this test on every single person that comes into your clinic. I would start around the age of 35 or 40, because it's about then that the meds start to decline. So I would start right around in there, get a baseline test to see how your patients are doing. If they test out great, fine, end of story. If they don't, you can then use the data, and Panos and I are going to be talking about how you can use that data to refine your program of them. And then every 1 or 2 years, make sure they come in, and every single person in your patient database, every 1 or 2 years, needs to have this checked. Because sooner or later, and I could tell you a personal story about me, my METs have always been high because I've been a bicycle racer for the most of my life. And my METs have always been high. But there was a time when I was 65 and I basically wasn't behaving myself. I was stressing out, wasn't sleeping well, drinking too much, et cetera, et cetera. You know the story. And I check my METs every year. And dang if it didn't fall down big time. And it was a little tap on my shoulder saying, okay, dude, you're getting older. You're not getting away with stuff like you used to get away with. So try to get some baseline done on your patient, everyone that walks in your door. And then every 1 to 2 years, make sure you check that because as they get older, they may get to a point where you're going to have to get in there and help them to improve things. So over to you, Panos. Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, I just wanted to give people a little bit of background on, the test itself and the underlying mechanisms of what's being tested and how we actually arrive to all these critical insights you've been discussing. We have found that people grasp these concepts better when they understand how it all works under the hood. So, um, like focusing on the, bare bone elements of the device, there's three sensors that you have in place in order to conduct the so-called VO2 max or cardiometabolic test. You have a flow sensor, you have an oxygen concentration sensor, and a CO2 sensor. And what you're seeing here in this graph is basically a representation of these three signals as they are recorded in real time. So you have this device on, right? Mask goes onto the person's face, and then this white thing is the flow sensor. It measures flow of air, volume of air going in and out. When you're seeing the positive part of the waveform, that's exhalation. The negative part of the waveform is inhalation. And as someone exhales, then the oxygen concentration is going to drop, right? Because you are seeing air coming from deeper within the lungs. Uh, Means that it has had more time to interact with the alveoli. So more oxygen has been extracted, and then more CO2 has been discharged in that chunk of air. And as a result, oxygen concentration drops, CO2 concentration goes up. And that's how we measure someone's breathing. Now, what we do from a mathematical algorithmic standpoint is signal processing on these three signals. And by doing so, we calculate the 23 biomarkers of cardiometabolic testing. Now, it's actually 20 coming from breath and another 3 coming from your heart rate monitor, where we do full spectrum HRV analysis, looking into the low frequency, high frequency, and very low frequency component of heart rate variability. But if you combine everything you're getting from the breath and everything you're getting from your HR monitor, you come up with these 23 biomarkers. And then some of them are actually quite famous, like VO2 max, right? A lot of people nowadays know and talk about VO2 max. And that's obviously very important because it looks into the global health of your system, of your body. But then there's a lot more besides VO2 max that can actually be very valuable for determining what the underlying pathologies is and what the underlying pathologies are, and also how we can actually focus on the system or systems that present the real problem for the patient. So, for instance, you have biomarkers like O2 pulse, right? O2 pulse is VO2 over heart rate. And what it shows us is how much oxygen your heart is pumping into the system per heart cycle. Another very important metric
Well,
that we have is,
let me just jump in there for all
yeah,
you medical guys. What he's just described is cardiac output.
yep,
Okay, so he just
yep,
there. How would you like to be able to check your cardiac output and every single person walked in your door, especially the older crew? That's pretty cool. And if it's not right, boy, that's a medical thing you're going to find out right away. And if you're not
mhm,
checking it, guess what? You're going to have patients coming in your office with poor cardiac output. You're not going to know it.
exactly. And so that's a great example, doctor just pointed out. Besides O2 pulse, another thing that is extremely important, very few people know about it, is the VE over VCO2. VE over VCO2 shows us oxygen perfusion in the lungs. In other words, it is showing us how efficiently lungs are absorbing oxygen and clearing carbon dioxide. Another very important one that doctor alluded to is fat oxidation and carbohydrate oxidation. So as I'm talking, you guys are starting to understand that a lot of these 23 biomarkers are actually system or organ specific. In other words, we get biomarkers that talk about the heart, or they talk about the lungs, or they talk about the cells. And by getting these biomarkers, we can start to zero in and double click on the specific systems that comprise the so-called oxygen chain, right? Oxygen chain is lungs, heart, and then cells. We can zero in the specific organs and identify which system has the issue. And that ties back to what doctor was saying, that it's not just about exercising, it's about the right type of exercise, because different types of exercise will affect the different systems that we have differently. For instance, you have a fat oxidation issue that is predominantly addressed through zone 2 training. The type of training you do in the area where you burn the most amount of fat. That's where you induce the greatest amount of mitochondrial biogenesis, as doctor discussed. You have a metabolic rate reduction issue. In other words, your energy homeostasis, the amount of energy your body is consuming, is dropping. That is actually a very big issue. It may be signifying you're losing muscle mass, or in most cases, it may be signifying that you're going through a hormonal dysregulation. A lot of people with low testosterone, low growth hormone, or women in perimenopause or menopause actually experience this metabolic decline. What do we do about that? Well, the most powerful um, uh, pill, type of exercise pill or subtype of exercise that we can do is resistance training. Um, when it comes to lungs, the most powerful type of training we can do is zone 4 interval training. So if we start to dissect all the different types of exercise we can prescribe to someone, we can start to understand that, you know, it's actually quite a few of them out there, and the way we prescribe them and the way we periodize them can actually have a profound impact on the type of biological adaptations we induce on the individual. And so, because you're actually getting system and organ specific information, you can therefore provide very targeted and personalized training that targets the limiting factor, as we like to call it, in that oxygen chain. And, just a little bit of background on uh, how you combine different assessments, right? Breath analysis is arguably one of the most valuable ones out there because you're not going to find anything else out there that gives you this level of diagnostic spectrum, but also diagnostic specificity, while it being something that is affordable and very easy to implement. Anything else you're going to find out there is going to be something that requires invasive procedures, requires blood draws, gets basically includes all of that stuff. And what you can do with breath analysis is you can get a very good snapshot of someone's biology and then move on with more specific assessments if you choose to do so. That was sort of like my 2 cents on how we typically like to explain breath analysis and how we describe the underlying process, what's happening under the hood. Over to you, doctor, to continue on with the conversation.
Yeah, that was really, really good, you guys. There's serious science behind this. And one of the things I've always liked about PNOE is the analyzer that they use um, is equal to the gold standard in medical medicine. For you guys out there that aren't quite aware, but VO2 analysis has been done for decades. It's just now it's coming around to being used, instead of for athletic centers like the Olympic Center or and hospitals to diagnose heart failure and such. This testing is now starting to come out, and PNOE's done a great job bringing it out to common everyday practitioners, something they can do in their office. And the equipment is great. It's every bit as good as the gold standard of equipment. Okay, so let's go here, and let me see how I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a share screen with you. Talk a little bit about some of the parameters we have here. All right. Okay, so I could go up here and do this, I think. Yeah, all right. Okay, is that showing up pretty good? Okay, so basically, the part that I've come in with PNOE is that I was so impressed with all the various metrics that they have, which Panos was just kind of sort of discussing some of them. That I asked them to please put in the metrics I've been using for over decades. So and they were kind enough to do that. So these are what we call bioenergy testing metrics. I've been using these, as I say, and teaching this for almost 25 years now. So they're slightly different. And so I'm going to kind of go in with these metrics. They really add to the metrics PNOE already has. So I'm going to walk through these a little bit. And what we intend to do over these webinars is teach you medical practitioners out there how to use this, how to make correct diagnosis and move on to other, like Panos was initiating. If something doesn't look right on the VO2 testing, that can lead you to other tests. So if you test your patient, you find out their cardiac output is bad, that could lead you to, maybe I'll get a cardiac consultation on this patient. And anyway, so I want to start off with the resting sort of analysis. And what this is you're just going to sit quietly in a chair, and you're going to be breathing through a mask type of thing, kind of like a scuba mask. And what it's going to be doing is going to be analyzing in real time how much oxygen you're consuming. That's going to determine your METs, okay? And how much CO2 you're releasing. That's going to help with other aspects, especially to determine what's the proper amount of carbohydrate that your body will respond to it, which is incredibly important, by the way. Because I'm going to tell you something that I first realized. I'm going to kind of like skip and come back to this in a sec. But when it comes to carbohydrates, quite fascinating. Uh, our cells can either burn fat or they can burn carbohydrate. Now, that's not true of nerve cells. Nerve cells and brain cells can only burn carbohydrate. They can't burn fat. But all the other cells in your body can go either for fat or for carbohydrate. The problem that you can run into with certain people is that due to their mitochondrial genetics, it's just the way they're born, due to their mitochondrial genetics, because mitochondria, by the way, have their own genetics, sole and separate from your nuclear genetics. But due to their mitochondrial genetics, they are not efficient carbohydrate burners. They don't burn glucose that efficiently. They do burn fat very efficiently, but not glucose very efficiently. Now, those people are going to have a big problem if they eat carbohydrate, because what carbohydrate is going to do is it's going to produce insulin. The insulin is going to stop the metabolism of fat. And, we've done this before. I'll never forget a patient of mine who came up from Southern California, kind of taught me this way back when. And this was a young guy. He was about like 42 years old. He was a movie actor, and he spent an awful lot of time in the gym, exercising, and he ate sprouts, and he did everything just perfectly. And he looked like Adonis, by the way. So he came in, and we tested, and his maximum METs was pathetically low. And, I talked to him and said, what the heck is going on with you? You do everything right. And I would have never expected your METs to be so dang low, your maximum METs to be so low. And talking to him, I learned, yeah, he did everything right except for one thing. He ate a Dairy Queen Blizzard every day. I'm not kidding you. He went out and had Dairy Queen Blizzard. I said, why do you do that? He says, number one, they taste really good and I like them. And number two, I do all this exercise and I'm eating sprouts the whole rest of the time. So I figure it's not a big deal. Well, it was a big deal because he didn't have the genetics to absorb the carbohydrate in that very high glucose drink that he was drinking. So what we did was I told him, okay, you keep doing everything that you're used to doing, and except get rid of the Dairy Queen Blizzards. Don't have any carbs, don't have any sugar. We bring him back in 2 weeks because it doesn't take very long. Bring him back in 2 weeks. His METs were up there around the 12, 15 range. And that gives you an idea of how important it is when we talk to our patients and we don't know whether they're primary fat or primary carbohydrate burners because we're not doing those measurements. And so we don't know how to give them the proper diet. You might give somebody a high carbohydrate diet when they ought to be on a low carbohydrate diet, and vice versa. You might give somebody on a low carbohydrate diet when they ought to be on a high carbohydrate diet. So I digress. Sorry about that. But we're going to come back with that when we look at some of these other parameters.
Doctor, just a short
Yeah.
parenthesis here for people. What doctor is referring to is something that is also um, colloquially known as metabolic flexibility. Like people use this term in multiple different settings, but basically our body's ability to switch between fat utilization, which is when we're, for the most part, fasted, we don't have food in the system, to glucose utilization, which is when we ingest food that will typically contain some carbohydrates. That ability to switch between the two is what people are referring to more and more these days as metabolic flexibility. And the reality is that there's a lot of things that may be harming your metabolic flexibility. And as a result, when that happens, when you're ingesting glucose, you're not able to insert it into the cell so that the cell converts that glucose into energy. And when that happens, basically your body is inevitably going to store that. And the only way it can store it is by building up bad fat. So that's the most simplistic way we can describe poor metabolic flexibility and the Pretty much what happens if someone ends up becoming metabolically inflexible, the consequence of that.
Okay, good point. Now, you can determine what we were just talking about here. You can determine this in the resting part of the test. There's basically two parts to this test. One is for 10 minutes, you're going to be sitting down, 8, 10 minutes, something like that. You're going to be sitting down quietly in a chair, and we're going to measure your how much oxygen you're consuming and how much carbon dioxide you're producing and what your flow rate is and what your heart rate is during that time sequence when you're resting. And so then we move to a second part of the test where it's the exercise part of the test. That's the VO2 max part of the test, where we're going to ramp you. We're going to make you exercise harder and harder and harder, and until you level off and you maximize out, and that'll give us your maximum METs. But when you're doing the resting part of the test, we have our patients come in the morning. I like them fasting. They take all their medications and hormones and supplements because we want to see what the effect of those things are on their VO2s. No strenuous exercise for 48 hours because that'll change your glycogen stores and will affect the readings on this. So what I decided on a long time ago is when I'm doing these tests to people over the age of 40, I don't really want to compare them to their own age bracket, because I'm of the impression that one of the worst things I could ever hear, I'm 79 years old now, one of the worst things I could ever hear is, Frank, you're very healthy for a 79-year-older. I don't want to be healthy for a 79-year-older. I want to be healthy for a 40-year-older. That's my goal. So what we do is anybody over the age of 40, we then compare them to the median of a database of people, their age, weight, and sex. So if I'm 79-year-old dude and I go in and I do the test, I'm going to be plugging in, I'm going to be comparing myself to a 40-year-old. So I want my metabolism, my resting data to be the same as a 40-year-old. The other thing that we do is we correct for body fat, because the more fat you have on your body, the heavier you are. And that weight is taken into account when we determine the database we're going to compare you to. And the truth is that fat is very metabolically poor, doesn't do anything, and it screws up the statistics. So we always compensate for excess body fat, because if you're overweight, you could have really good METs, but it's not going to come out as good if we don't correct for your body fat percentage. So that's how we get the resting data. So that resting data, along with the exercise data, evaluates for, in the bioenergy testing scheme, evaluates for 5 factors. Number 1 factor is what we call EQ, or your energy quotient. Everybody's got an intelligence quotient. That's your IQ. It's how good your brain is. So an EQ is how good your mitochondria are, how good your overall heart is, how good your circulation is, how good your engine is, basically. That's your energy quotient. And that's basically going to refer to your maximum METs. And it's going to refer to your maximum METs compared to the maximum METs of a 40-year-old. So if you're 65 years old and you've got the maximum METs of a 40-year-old, guess what? Your body is operating along the lines of a 40-year-old. You can look at yourself in the mirror and you can say, wait a second, I got wrinkles. My hair isn't like the way it used to be. I got all these signs of aging. But from a cellular standpoint, from a physiological standpoint, your heart, your lungs, your cells, your circulation, your nutritional data, your diet, everything is dialed in perfectly in that instance. When you have a high EQ, everything's dialed in perfectly for your particular metabolism. And that's so important, because we see this all the time. So we'll have a couple come in and they drink the same water, they eat the same diet, live in the same environment, have many, many, many of the same habits, but of course they're not the same. They have different genetics, they have different mitochondrial genetics, they have different nuclear genetics. One will have a great EQ, the other one will have a poor EQ, and they both feel great. So how are you going to know? So So the guy that's got the great EQ, I'm going to tell her that you're doing just great for your genetics. The guy with the poor EQ, I'm saying we're going to have to look at something here because something's wrong with you. And we stand alerted. Either it's wrong with your heart, it's wrong with your lungs, it's wrong with the way you breathe. There's all these other metrics we can talk about. It's particularly maybe wrong with your diet. Maybe you aren't metabolically flexible, like Panos was talking about. Maybe you have to really restrict your diet in a certain way. So we can determine all that just right from the get-go, just looking at that energy quotient. Very fascinating and very good number, solid number to look at. The other thing that we get from the resting data is your resting metabolism. Now, why is this important? So I'm going to take a few minutes here to talk to my medical colleagues about this resting metabolism. Resting metabolism is how much oxygen is determined by how much oxygen I consume when I'm at rest, my rate of oxygen consumption at rest. Why is that important? That's important because it's determined almost exclusively. There's some other factors. One is sleep. If I've got very poor sleep, that will screw up my resting metabolism. Another is decreased muscle mass, which is quite common with the older folks. But the main factor that determines resting metabolism is your thyroid function. So in medicine, in medical school, we were trained to use blood tests to determine whether the thyroid was healthy. And those blood tests are very accurate for determining thyroid disease, okay? But they're very inaccurate at determining age-related hypothyroidism. So what am I talking about when I use that term, age-related hypothyroidism? I'm talking about the fact that as we get older, all the hormone glands don't work as well as they used to work when we were younger. So your ovaries don't work as well, your testicles don't work as well, and your thyroid doesn't work as well. It's not a disease. This is just a fact of aging. So as your testosterone gets low, guess what? You take some testosterone to make up for it because you want to have youthful testosterone levels. Similar with your estrogens and your progesterones, as they get low, you do the same thing. But if you're not testing resting metabolism, you're going to be missing who needs thyroid. And thyroid is absolutely critical for us because thyroid, I don't know if you remember, about 10 minutes ago, I was talking about uncoupling proteins 1 and 2, which regulate metabolism, which regulate mitochondrial function. Those are absolutely rate limited by the thyroid hormone T3. So as your thyroid goes down as you age, and I will tell you right now, if you're over the age of 50, the chances are 50-50 that you have a age-related thyroid problem. And you need to get your resting metabolism checked so that you can find out whether you do or not. Because the lab tests will not discover this. Over and over again, I have seen people with about the metabolic rate was a good like 60% or 70% of what it ought to be. They're very low, and yet their thyroid blood tests are completely normal. And so what we did is we put them on thyroid. They got better, and we would have never done that if I was just relying on thyroid blood tests. So I want to point out that the energy quotient is really good for determining overall health, and the M factor is really good at looking at your resting metabolism. Basically, we get your metabolic rate, and then we compare it to what would be usual and normal for a 40-year-old, your sex, height, and weight, and then we eliminate excess fat if you happen to be obese. The C factor is a measurement of the ratio of the oxygen consumed to the carbon dioxide pouring out. And it kind of works like this. C stands for carbohydrate, by the way. If you purely burn glucose, let's say your cells are purely burning glucose. That doesn't happen, of course, but let's just say it did. You would find that the amount of carbon dioxide you produced from just burning glucose is twice as much as if you were burning fat. And that runs along a continuum. That's a linear factor. which means that we can predict it based upon that ratio of O2 to CO2. So if that ratio is 1, your cells would only be burning glucose, no fat at all. If that ratio is 0.85, you're burning equal amounts of fat and glucose. And if that ratio gets down to about, say, 0.76 to 0.78 in a resting condition, you are burning fat maximally. You're doing a really good job that way. And that's important for what Panos was just talking about when it comes into metabolically flexible, because you're going to have 3 kinds of patients walk in your office. You're going to have one, the metabolically flexible people. Basically, they can eat whatever they want in the sense, as long as it's good food, right? But they can have a diet with a lot of fat, and they will thrive. They can have a diet with a lot of protein, and they will thrive. They can have a diet with a lot of carbohydrate, and they will thrive because their metabolism is able to adjust to that. But that's not everybody. There are people on the fringe of that. So on the one hand, you have people that burn glucose very well, but they don't burn fat well. They need to be on a high glucose type of diet. They need to be on a high carbohydrate diet. Those are the vegetarian types, okay? Then you have other people that don't metabolize glucose very well, but they burn fat very well. They need to be more on the keto, high fat type of diet. And of course, there's a spectrum in there that you can determine. But folks, if you're not measuring C factor, if you're not looking at resting fat metabolism, you don't know what to tell your patient. And I know there's a lot of practitioners out there that got a one diet fits all mentality. Every one of their patients, they want them to be on a plant-based diet. That's wrong. You're going to hurt people. Or there's other people out there, every one of their patients ought to be on a ketogenic diet. That's wrong. You're going to hurt people. You need to measure this. And this C factor is a great way to do that. PNOE also has some other metrics that Panos can probably address here that can help to determine that. But this is a really good, you want to add anything to that, Panos?
For the most part, this is the general idea, right? There are additional insights that you can derive in terms of like the caloric intake, and then based on caloric intake, what the percentage and the absolute number of carbohydrates and fats should be. But, in general, I think the idea you described kind of encompasses everything.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of forgot that. When we test your resting metabolism, it's going to be read in terms of calories. So metabolism is determined in terms of calories. So basically, what we're going to say is something like, okay, Frank, your resting metabolism is 1,520 calories, which means that your body, if you did absolutely no activity, let's say you just laid in a bed for 24 hours, your body would just, by your pure existence, would burn 1,520 calories. Now, of course, nobody does that. So you'll be out walking around, you'll be maybe exercising, and you'll be burning more calories that way. But this is the best way you can tell for people that have problems with their fat management. They can't lose their weight, or they can't maintain a healthy weight, which of course is critical. We know that if you have too much fat on board, if your fat percentage is too high, you're at risk for every single disease there is, from cancer to cardiovascular disease to strokes. Name me a disease, and if you're obese or you have a high fat percentage, you're at greater risk because of that. So we do want to deal with this with weight management. And the only way you can effectively deal with that is when you know what the resting metabolism is. So you can tell them, okay, look, you need to restrict your calories to this. You can't be having calories like that because your body doesn't burn enough calories to account for the diet that you're on. So, and we can give very healthy diets. And by the way, that also reminds me of what we all know about calorie restriction. So, about the only thing that anti-aging experts agree on is that restricting calories will make you live longer. There's no doubt about that. And one of the problems that we have in everyday modern civilizations like ours is that, food is just plentiful. We can eat all day long. and that's not good for our health. We do not want to, eat all day long. We do want to have periods of time where we're actually restricting the calories below our resting metabolism periodically. Now, that's called intermittent fasting, but you can actually start dialing that in. And in future webinars, we'll talk about how you can dial intermittent fasting in based upon your resting metabolism. This is a great little thing that all us practitioners can do to help patients, particularly those who need to get a better control on their weight. Fat burning factor is how, so M factor is going to tell me or C factor is going to tell me how effectively you burn fat at rest. Now, why is that important? Because we're at rest almost all the time. We don't exercise all day long. A fat burning factor is going to tell me how efficiently you burn fat when you're in an exercising state. So basically, we can tell you, okay, when you exercise at this heart rate, you are burning fat maximally. Now, for some of our patients, that's going to be very important. We want them to burn fat maximally. Obviously, one situation would be is if they have too much fat on board and we want to get rid of the fat. We can tell them exactly at what level. So I would tell them, okay, look, I don't necessarily want you running, but I want you going out and walking at a rate that is going to get your heart rate up to this particular level where you're burning maximal fat. And we can determine that based upon this fat burning factor. So those are the main things that the bioenergy testing evaluates. But what is exciting to me is those are the things I've been using for the last 25 years. But PNOE is added in so many more metrics. They're evaluating VO2 peak, ventilation efficiency, respiratory capability, breathing coordination, lung utilization, high intensity performance. All of these things are valuable assessments for medical management. And that's one message that I joined up with PNOE. I just want to bring this message out to all my medical colleagues. We need to be doing this. We need to be checking all of these things in every one of our patients. Look, my impression, this is way more important than knowing my patient's glucose. If my patient's glucose is off, that's not going to determine survivability by a factor of 400%. This is more important than blood pressure. I can show you data that would tell you this is more important than even your blood pressure. So I would rather have my patient have high blood pressure and have really good VO2s than have low blood pressure and have poor VO2s. They will live longer with the higher VO2 and the higher blood pressure than they would with the lower blood pressure and the lower VO2s. So this is a critical thing we all want to do, and we're going to be talking about these in these series of webinars, so I hope you keep tuned in. How much more time do we have, Panos?
Actually, I was just gonna say we're running low on time. I just wanted
Yeah,
to
might be a
address
good
a few
time for you to
things.
kind of conclude everything, and
Yeah, yeah,
we'll go
yeah.
on with the rest of it. Yeah.
I just wanted to point out a few things from a logistics perspective. Dr. Schallenberger will be our guest speaker in A4M coming up in Vegas this weekend. Doctor, your speech you said is on Saturday, right?
Yeah, it's a Saturday. It's either at 3 or 3:30. I kind of
Yeah,
think it's at 3.
should be in the schedule. So if you guys are attending, would be a great opportunity to listen in person and perhaps get to meet Dr. Schallenberger in person. Also, our team is going to be there. We have one of the biggest booths in the show, tons of offers, promos, etc., launching specifically during A4M. So if you guys are interested in considering PNOE and you're there, one of the best opportunities to seize. And then, since obviously there's a lot more in this discussion, Dr. Schallenberger and I will be doing this webinar on continuous basis. I think the next one is going to be early January, so we're keeping a cadence of once a month. So stay tuned for the next episode of this webinar where we're going to be basically continuing this discussion. For people that have questions or for people that want to discover more about PNOE, what we do around the analysis of the data, the customized report that we have developed for Dr. Schallenberger specifically, that includes his bioenergetic metrics and whatnot. You guys can schedule a call directly with our team. You can do so by visiting our website, pnoe.com. There's a bunch of ways you can schedule some time with us. But again, if you're in Vegas this upcoming weekend, please stop by our booth and say hi. Also, one of the best opportunities to get tested with PNOE. What we typically do in the booth in every trade show is we test people. Things get very busy, so don't be surprised if there's like a line for people to get tested, but it's just how it is. And yeah, I would like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar and obviously Dr. Schallenberger for sharing all of his teachings and insights. And I look forward to seeing you, Dr. Schallenberger, and everyone else in Vegas.
Okay, so that'd be great. And by the way, folks, a couple of things. Number one, I'm going to be at the booth. So as you can tell, I love talking about this stuff. So I'll be talking about it all day long, and I'll love it. So don't hesitate to drop by. We can talk about medicine in general. We can talk about very specifically how these things can play in. Also, if you're listening and you have questions or issues, and as we go through this down the line, you might even, they talk about cases like I got a patient who can't lose weight, or I got a patient who has high blood pressure and I can't figure out how VO2s might help that patient. Go ahead and you can go to the PNOE website, or maybe Panos can give you another email, but email any of your questions to us and we'll try to cover those. And then the last thing I wanted to say is if you decide to go ahead and purchase this equipment, which I hope you do, I really hope you do, but if you decide to go ahead and purchase it, PNOE has provided us with a code that gets you a 10% discount.
100%.
And
Yeah.
that code is,
Mhm.
I'll just give you
So,
the code. You want to give them the code?
actually, yeah, if you want to give out the code, then also
Okay.
on the chat, my team posted the
Okay.
link to schedule time with us. If you schedule time through that link, we automatically register the discount code, Dr. Schallenberger's discount code. So yeah, that's just another easier way of taking advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, so if you, the code is PNOE, P-N-O-E, and then D-R for doctor, and then shall, S-H-A-L, and then the year 2025. So it's PNOE, D-R, shall, S-H-A-L, 2025, and that'll get you a 10% discount on this fabulous equipment.
Awesome. Thank you, doctor, and thanks everyone for your time. We'll stay tuned.
Okay, great.
Bye.